Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining the 6th Annual Aphasia Conference. I am so proud to be able to continue to provide the services for those that have had a stroke, traumatic brain injury, and living with aphasia. Without the resources we have or did not know we have, we wouldn't be able to do this. And without the Rhode Island Department of Health continuing to sponsor this, we have been able to continue to do this without charging anyone to attend our conference. So big thank you for them. And thank you all for learning more about what is available for us, not just here in the state of Rhode Island, but around the world. We have people here around the states and around the countries. So thank you all for attending. At this point, I'd like to say thank you to Crystal for doing her presentation today. And at this point, I am just going to turn it away to you and take it away.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning, everyone around the country. And coming here from Rhode Island, I'm presenting the Rhode Island Governor's Commission on Disabilities presentation of inclusive community resources for individuals with aphasia and their caretakers. So next, I'd like to just give a very brief bio of how I've gotten to this position. My name's Crystal Martin, and I'm from Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and now I live in East Providence with my daughter and partner, Anthony. And I was a returning student as an adult, and I returned to Community College of Rhode Island, and that's where I studied art. And I really got influenced by taking general education classes, so it led me to the School of Social Work at Rhode Island College. And then from there, I ventured off into Johnson & Wales University to learn human resource management for my master's program. And all the while, I was working at the University Club in Providence for 14 years and ended up at Disability Rights Rhode Island for the past 4 years as an intake advocate and during the heart of the pandemic, and got this really amazing opportunity to work at the Rhode Island Governor's Commission on Disabilities. So my role here is an assistant ADA coordinator for employment and services. And I'd just like to define what an ADA coordinator is, or an Americans with Disabilities Act coordinator. And their role is to ensure that public entities comply with the ADA and prevent discrimination against people with disabilities. And next, I would like to make sure that I'm saying Happy National Aphasia Awareness Month. And I know that this year's theme is amplifying aphasia voices, so changing awareness by empowering expression. This has been an opportunity for the NAA to educate the public about aphasia, what it is and what it is not. The National Aphasia Association encouraged people to share the message that 2 million people have aphasia and have lost some ability to use words on social media during the month. They also increased their newsletter to publish in scheduled events every Thursday in June to make sure that everyone is getting information about those events to raise awareness. And moving on, I just want to tell everyone a little bit about the Americans with Disabilities Act. The Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits discrimination based on disability in employment, state and local government, public accommodations, commercial facilities, transportation, and communications. So while passed in 1990, the ADA story began a long time ago in cities and towns throughout the United States, where people with disabilities began to challenge societal barriers that excluded them from their communities. And when parents of children with disabilities began to fight against the exclusion and segregation of their children. So there are governor's commissions on disabilities in every state. And the way it started is 1947, President Harry S. Truman established the President's Committee on the Employment of the Physically Handicapped, now outdated terminology, and asked each governor to create their own committee to help disabled veterans find work. The GCD today, as it's commonly referred to, is the entity that enforces compliance with the ADA, not only for physical accessibility requirements of the ADA, accessibility to government and businesses, Title 2 and 3, employment accommodations, Title 1, and then we have our livable homes modification grants, which is essentially a rebate for construction projects that help with needs like ramps or talking stoves, assistive technology, and that is the intention, to keep people out of institutions. Now, to go to our agenda. Oops, excuse me, I hit that by accident. The resources for individuals I'm going to break down in 3 different sections: post-hospitalization recovery, returning to community life, rejoining the workforce, and I have a couple of miscellaneous resources as well to conclude with. So my hopes is that I lead you in the right direction to resources, because many of these organizations have referral services as well. And I'll focus in from the point of view of Rhode Island, but for resources that can be attained throughout the United States in this presentation. So one thing that I really want to point out is that I've put hyperlinks to national resources that I'm going through with each particular slides, and try to be high overview. But in the references, I have a complete list of all the hyperlinks for national resources that I'll touch base on and discuss throughout the presentation. The first set of resources that I'd like to talk about is the Department of Human Resources, and that is on the national level. And here in Rhode Island, the Department of Human Resources, the Department of Human Resources, their services in general, trying to be just from Rhode Island, it's everywhere. It's a national association of services which are responsible for providing public assistance programs to the population they serve. So everywhere. These services include Medicaid, Medicare programs, multi-health care options through publicly funded Medicaid and programs, as well as Medicaid premium payment programs for those on federal Medicare. And then long-term supports and services. This is a very good resource. Custom services for older adults or people with disabilities or chronic care needs living within a variety of settings, and as well as they have the SSI Enhanced Living Program. And just to highlight the other programs of the Department of Human Services, they have the Supplemental Nutrition Program, SSI supplement payments, financial and employment assistance for families, refugee assistance, public cash assistance, as well as energy assistance and childcare. In addition, they have their divisions of the Office of Child Supports, the Office of Healthy Aging, Office of Rehabilitative Services, which we'll get into a little bit more towards the end of part of this presentation, and the Office of Veterans Affairs. And this is probably going to be the resource I spend most information on, which I believe could be very helpful for many people around the country. There's Centers for Independent Livings, or they also known as CILS by their acronym. Now, Centers for Independent Living centers are consumer-controlled, consumer-based, cross-disability, non-residential, private nonprofit agency that is designed and operated with local community by individuals with disabilities and provides an array of independent living services. So just to highlight, their core services include independent living skills, which teach a wide range of skills needed to live independently and manage life with a disability. Skills training is available to people with disabilities in almost any topic where there's a need for more independence. Information referral and almost case management like, but I'll stop there. They provide consumers information with their families, service providers, and general public with information with a wide array of community resources. And there will be pretty much on accessible housing services, disability services that are affordable, transportation options, adaptive equipment, support services, and more. So they also help people transitioning from a nursing home, assisting people with disabilities moving out of nursing homes or other institutions into independent living arrangements of their choice, as well as helping them prevent people with disabilities from entering those institutions. And finally, they just even have other programs as well as their youth transition services, advocacy and outreach trainings, and peer support groups, which is a very popular program in Rhode Island here at the Ocean State Center for Independent Living. And they do what is called Lunch and Learn. The image on the screen is one of those particular events. And I would like to mention that my first presentation for the Governor's Commission on Disabilities was for a Lunch and Learn. I was challenged and it was wonderful. Next, I'd like to talk about adaptive telephone equipment loan programs. Now, there's a hyperlink at the bottom of the screen for accessing these programs by state. But essentially what this program does, it in the United States provide landlines and home telephones and wire devices on loan to qualified individuals who are deaf, hard of hearing, or have a speech disability, or have neuromuscular damage or diseases that hinder them from using a standard telephone. And one example of a program that administers is Tech Access Rhode Island. And in all 50 states, in the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and U.S. territories, they receive funding through the Assistive Technology Act from 2004, and that is to support state-assisted technology programs. So the United Way, this is a worldwide organization, and the website that I have is for around the world, but you can locate all of the different U.S. state territories for the United Way. In Rhode Island, there is the 211 hotline, which is all about referrals. So the United Way is, again, a worldwide organization with a focus on economic mobility, helping people with families be financially secure. The United Way hotline provides information, referrals for healthcare, transportation, resources, individuals with disabilities, victim services, legal and tax assistance, food assistance, job training, veterans services, housing and utility assistance, and children's programs as well. Now, the Brain Associations of America. Here we have the Rhode Island Brain Injury Association, and their mission is comprised of brain injury survivors and their families and friends, healthcare professionals, and physicians, providers of brain injury rehabilitation, and other advocates that support this mission. They increase public awareness of brain injury and its consequences. They provide families with access to resources for survivors, family, caregivers, and professionals throughout their resource centers. They develop support systems, encourage appropriate rehabilitation and services for survivors of brain injury, and they disseminate information about brain injury. The association actively collaborates with state and private entities to educate survivors, family members, and professionals on all aspects of brain injury prevention, treatment, and support needs. And I would like to highlight that here in Rhode Island, beginning during the pandemic, that there has been support groups that have been developed, and they continue on. There is right now one virtual and 2 in-person support groups that the Rhode Island Brain Injuries Association has. So that is a very great resource that I really would like to highlight and emphasize with a smile. So continuing on, mental health resources. Here in Rhode Island, there is a list of community health care providers, and that is created by our local Rhode Island Behavioral Health, Developmental Disabilities and Hospitals. And I've also highlighted essentially a crisis center and referral organization of Behavioral Health Link, and they do even have emergency housing assistance as well. So nationally, there is the crisis hotline, and to look for, to obtain information on providers by state, people can look on the National Alliance on Mental Illness, otherwise known as NAMI's website, and find information on state by state for providers. And then I really would like to speak of, because it should always be brought up whenever it could, about the 988 Suicide Crisis Hotline. They offer free confidential crisis counseling 24/7, 365, and you don't have to be in crisis to call or text. So the crisis line also offers 24/7 mental health support by text, and that's by texting the word scrubs, SCRUBS, to the number 741-741 for help. And then next, I'd like to speak about Social Security Administration benefits. Just generally, to define it, as the United States Social Security Administration is an independent agency of the U.S. federal government that administers Social Security and Social Security insurance programs consisting of retirement, disability, and survivor benefits. Now, everyone can find by state their local Social Security office, but the main hub is their SSA.gov website. That is where you prepare for applying for benefits and get a benefits estimate or plan for retirement. And you can apply on that website for benefits and Medicare, apply for SSI, which is Supplementary Security Income, or SSDI, which is Social Security Disability Insurance. And then after you apply, you can check the application status on this main website, as well as appeal a decision on the main website. And then after Social Security administrative benefits are obtained, there is an app called the My SSA app, which could be very useful for keeping track of benefits, especially if you are returning to work. So I will speak more of that in just a little bit. But I do want to highlight my former employer a couple times in this presentation. I know a lot about their resources. And particularly when it comes to Social Security Administration matters, they have a resource of attorneys that specialize in pro bono and Social Security Administration matters that can be obtained. But they also have a program which is under their investigators program, which is investigating representative payee abuse or neglect. So that can be done through the website of Disability Rights Rhode Island, and have that information in our references and handouts as well. But one more thing I'd like to bring to attention to is they have 9 grants that administer the funds for the Protection and Advocacy Agency of Disability Rights Rhode Island. And one of them is called Protection and Advocacy of Beneficiaries of Social Security. And that grant will provide assistance potentially, and I don't speak for another organization now, assistance with employment matters, including a client assistance program for vocational rehabilitation. I'll hold off on that again, but at least I'm introducing it. So,
excuse me, Crystal.
Yes.
I apologize for interrupting. Could you slow down just a little bit, please?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for doing that. Take a breath and move on. And next, I'd like to highlight information about guardianship and supported decision-making. While I do not have a legal background, I would just want to make sure that I'm presenting what this information is, some resources, and talking about the alternatives to guardianship just a bit. Guardianship, also referred to as conservatorship, is a legal process utilized when a person can no longer make or communicate safe or sound decisions about his or her person and or property, and has become susceptible to fraud or undue influence. Because establishing a guardianship may remove considerable rights from an individual, it should only be considered after alternatives to guardianship have been proven ineffective or unavailable. And the resources for creating or dissolving a guardianship would be probate courts or local bar associations, and particularly for dissolving guardianships and looking at alternatives like supported decision-making would be protection and advocacy agencies, and like Disability Rights Rhode Island. And there is a national Association, National Disability Rights Network, which could connect you with your state protection and advocacy agency. And supported decision-making. What it is first, it is a process that allows people to make choices about their lives and help from trusted friends, families, and professionals. Supported decision-making is an alternative to guardianship that can be used by anyone in any area of life. Study after study has shown when people with disabilities have more control of their life and make more decisions for themselves, they have more self-determination and they live better lives. People with disabilities who are more determined and are more likely to live independently, work, or be integrated in their communities and avoid abuse. And as promised, I'm going to highlight another resource from Disability Rights Rhode Island. Is their webinar that was created in 2021. It is a 5-part on-demand series on supported decision-making, and it is hosted by Disability Rights Rhode Island, but presented by Jonathan Martinez. He is an attorney who is a lead on the subject of supported decision-making and goes through it in the beginning, presenting the information on the different subjects and then going into depth in the 4 that follow. It's a great resource and it is on their website and is included in our resources. So transportation options, I would like to say, and focusing on paratransit or intermediate public transport. And this is a type of transportation services that is supplement fixed route mass transit provided by individual rides without fixed routes or timetables. Paratransit services can vary considerably on the degree of flexibility and the programs that provide to their customers. And there is in Rhode Island and around the country, non-emergency medical transportation services, and I've highlighted where to find them by state. And it covers essentially all transportation. What non-emergency medical transportation is it covers all services that are provided to patients that are not an emergency or in need of an ambulance. And next, I'd like to speak about voting. And this is where I met Denise Lowe, 2023 Assistive Technology Day, while I was working at Disability Rights Rhode Island. That's me behind the camera. And essentially, I just smiled and willed her to come over to the Disability Rights Rhode Island table. And there's Ken. You can see him in the image as well. And I wanted to speak about the express voting machine, and that demonstrations are conducted by the Secretary of State's office and in conjunction with Disability Rights Rhode Island. And that is actually Kate Bowden, who's done most of the training on express vote machine in the state of Rhode Island here. So wonderful former colleague. But going back to the Governor's Commission on Disabilities, what our role, and actually I get to facilitate in my role, is we conduct voter polling place monitoring for accessibilities in every polling place in Rhode Island. And that is what the Governor's Commission on Disabilities does throughout the states. And what we do in the monitoring is report back to the Board of Elections, as well as the city and town's local Board of Canvassers, for resolving the issues that were identified on election days by the polling monitors. It's all volunteer work, so I get to coordinate, communicate, and report in all under the supervision of the ADA coordinator at the Governor's Commission on Disabilities, as well as the executive secretary at the GCD. And now I'm going to speak.
I'm just going to vote on that, tell you more about the voting. This was the first time I had learned that I could make a vote all by myself. I always had to have assistance with the difficulty with reading and writing and all of the information on voting. It was really independent. It was really felt me empowering that now I can vote totally independent. And anybody that's voting, these machines are available for all voting stations. So if you've never had the opportunity to go and vote on your own or always needing assistance, especially, those that live with disabilities, this is really a place of feeling empowerment and making your decision on your own and not feeling like you have to listen to somebody else, or if you feel that, you want to keep your votes private. These are things that I just felt was one of the most empowering things I was able to do using these devices. So if you haven't had a chance to go out and vote, this is the time of year you're going to want to think about it and make your voice heard.
Thank you very much, Denise. It was a pleasure to include you in the PowerPoint. I will mention that I was looking at the TV. We save all our pictures and just upload them to one of those projectors that you can just keep on going. And after we reconnected after the brain fair this past year, I'm like, wait a minute, why do you seem so familiar? And then it was that one moment in the picture that I took. I'm like, oh geez, that's Candace. So okay, let me get back to my more serious tone. It squeaks out my true colors always, but I'm going to next speak about employment. So I'm going to begin with vocational rehabilitation. And that's what it's known like around the country, but in Rhode Island, it's called the Office of Rehabilitative Services. And in general, vocational rehabilitation helps people with physical, psychiatric, learning disabilities find and keep a job. The VR helps you identify job goals based on your interests and skills and explore college and vocational training. And what I wanted to speak about was the client assistance program before. And if you have an encounter with problems receiving services from the Department of Rehabilitation or independent living centers, like I mentioned before, or other programs or activities that are funded by the Rehabilitation Act, you may request assistance from the Client Assistance Program. And again, the protection and advocacy agencies are the organizations that facilitate those programs. And I wanted to talk about employment resources. There are many, and I have highlighted a by state job center where you can find the local employment resources. But I wanted to just give you an example of one we have in Rhode Island, is Skills for Rhode Island's Future. And that is a nonprofit organization that breaks down barriers and economic opportunity by connecting the unemployed and the underemployed Rhode Islanders with jobs that are with socially responsible, civic-minded employers. And they also have the program called Workability, which is essentially case management for those who need it to find those particular positions. And then for all state Department of Labor and Trainings, they provide workforce development, workforce security, workforce protection to the state workers, employers, and residents, and offering employment services is what I'm really trying to highlight. Educational services and economic opportunities for both individuals as well as employers. Now, when returning to work, I mentioned the SSA app is finding a balance between how much you can work and make with keeping your benefits. It causes a lot of problems for people. There is a national organization for the Ticket to Work that can provide those resources. And here in Rhode Island, we have the Sherlock Center, who's created after a local politician here, and we'll go into the history. But the Sherlock Center has a long history of partnering with state and community organizations and local Social Security offices to provide work incentives, benefits, counseling to individuals with disabilities entering the workforce and are interested in returning to work. There are webinars done by the Sherlock Center for those in Rhode Island on a monthly basis, and they break it down to SSI or SSDI subjects. So they're just really want to highlight that as well. And continuing on to jobs, this is more of a definition to begin with reasonable accommodations. I want to talk about the hub of reasonable accommodations, the job accommodation network, and who enforces any claims of discrimination in employment, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, excuse me. So giving at least first the meaning of reasonable accommodations. It's a modification or a job adjustment or the work environment or the way things are usually done during the hiring process. This modification enables an individual with a disability to have equal opportunity, not just to get a job, but successfully perform the task at the same extent people without disabilities. The ADA requires accommodations that relate to 3 aspects of employment. 1, the application process. 2, enabling an individual with a disability to perform essential functions of the job. And 3, making it possible for an employee with a disability to enjoy equal benefits and privileges of employment. And before I go into these examples, I'm going to speak about Job Accommodation Network. They are for employers as well as employees, and this is a leading source of free, expert, confidential guidance and job accommodations in disability employment issues. And then the enforcement of discrimination matters to where it would go to the top is the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Apparently that's a tongue twister for me. But this organization is responsible for enforcing federal law that makes it illegal to discriminate against a job applicant or employee because of a person's race, color, religion, sex, including pregnancy, childbirth, or other related conditions, gender identity or sexual orientation, national origin, age 40 or older, and disability or genetic information. So, an example. I actually can't see all of it, so pardon my silence for 1 second. Faces are covering it. During hiring, the example of employment accommodations. An employee candidate can request that a potential employer provide written materials in accessible formats, such as large print, braille, audio files, or recruitment interview, or the onboarding process. And then probably highlighting someone that's more familiar, something that's very familiar to everyone over the past year is John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania. He has employment accommodations now that he's recovering from a stroke, and the New York Times has reported about his physical impairments following the stroke. Those reasonable accommodations include closed captioning, live audio text transcriptions for the committees on which Mr. Fetterman serves. So kind of leaning towards the conclusion of the presentation, I wanted to talk about libraries. Libraries are the great sources of resources. And in Rhode Island, we have what is Disability Resources A to Z. And particularly the Talking Books program. And I wanted to just speak about what it is. These are around the country. So there is a national resource to be able to connect to local state providers and libraries, but digital audiobooks and Braille and other reading materials. These are equipment that are provided free to residents who are visually impaired, blind, or physically handicapped or unable to read standard materials. And essentially the history of talking books goes back to 1931. And I'll stop there. So next, I'm just going to speak about the Governor's Commission on Disabilities public forums. This happens with all Governor's Commission on Disabilities, and we have ours at the anniversary of the signing of the ADA as close as we can. This is just a couple days off this year. And essentially what this is, it's an opportunity for the Governor's Commission on Disabilities to hear Rhode Islanders, and it's repeated in all states, issues pertaining to laws that affect individuals with disabilities. And part of the Governor's Commission on Disabilities work is to advocate for laws that affect individuals with disabilities. So that becomes part of a process to be able to hear right from the people of Rhode Island to make these decisions as the committees. And absolutely lastly, the success stories. So I'd like to segue you all into what will be your next week's presentation. And really just as much as I've learned about Denise, my way to describe her is a will and a way. And Denise is a success story and a true advocate. And this conference began in Rhode Island is now a free national resource for community supports and awareness of aphasia. And it just started off in a library in Warwick. So, it's just, you never know what you can accomplish by just beginning. And that is just real great inspiration to me. And I'll end with some inspiration when it comes to Judy Heumann. She was one of the lead pioneer advocates for the passing of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act in 1973 and participated in many protests for physical access to government services and programs. And just to simply put it, when other people see you as a third-class citizen, the first thing you need is the belief in yourself and the knowledge that you have rights. And the next thing you need is a group of friends to fight back with. Judy Heumann. So with that concludes my presentation, and I'm willing to answer any questions that anyone has. And I really hope that I've led you in the right direction to resources that could be of assistance to anyone, and whether you're an individual with aphasia or a caretaker. So with that, I'm just going to kind of pass it off to Denise or Pam or Ken to see how we're going to bring off into that question and answer portion of our program.
Well,
Finish off thank you, everybody. To wrap up our conference, I would like to thank Crystal for doing this amazing presentation, and I think it was very educational for many. I learned more again today. So you're always learning and finding new services available. This month, we're going to follow it up with telling the story of those living with aphasia. Our keynote speaker will be Dr. Katie Strong, and she will be talking about the therapeutic approach of living with aphasia in a story format. We are going to have some amazing guest speakers with her. Those are empowered and living with aphasia, telling their stories. And I'm so happy that Roger, Kathy, and Becca will be here to share their story of how life still goes on, and will be so motivating to keep going and to motivate your family and friends to never give up, that we do improve. It may be a little long journey, but we make it and we keep living a positive life. To wrap this up today, I would like to have my friend Mike tell a little bit of his story and wrap it up with a beautiful poem. Michael O., can you please accept him into our there he is. Michael, are you ready to go? And I think Carolyn's behind you. So if you're ready, we're going to wrap it up with Michael. And after Michael's done with his poem, we're going to say goodbye, stay cool, and enjoy the beautiful summer weather we're having.
Thank you so much. I'm Michael Obelamia. I'm a friend of Denise for 6 years of Aphasia conference. It's incredible to remember the one we had in 2019 with people, about 60 persons there. Now about 64 people are there now, and it's beautiful. I read a poem then, and I'll read now. In March, I read a poem about what is it to be a part of this poetry. It's called Where You Started and Where You Are Now. And I thought about that as a talk, and I said, what do I have about this poem? And now I have what it is now. I'll read it to anyone who wants to hear it. And I thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Denise. This is beautiful. Thank you very much. Where you started, where you are now. That's a funny thing, sigh. Where you are started, a dreary, echoing down, falling fast. Without Carolyn, I might have just died. Falling, descending, clasping on my sheets. Michael, are you okay? Michael, hear me. Saturday, no. This day was momentous. Believing something else was done. But no, limping felt down, throwing against chair. With silence, I fell asleep. Now, deeply. Only my wife. Ambulance plus ambulance, I moved. Don't forget the iPhone. You'll need me too. Oh Lord, my God, I cry to you for help. 2,945 days. Counting. That's ischemic stroke, aphasia. There is so much to do. So much to do. Depression, frustration, anger, confused. But life's a journey, and I'm on my way. Most I can feel it, but where you are now? Let's see. Well, I'm published, finding my words. I cycle, stroke across America, cycling from Missoula, from Revere Beach. I can read speeches, presentations. I can read, listen to the published words. Littlebury, Barrington, they know. Felicitate me, friend, you're inspired. From ship's cap to even more speeches now. I can do this. I can be happy now. From poetry, Toastmasters, cooking, I am fulsome, eudaimic, too. Life is changing now, very different. You pulled me from the shoal. You spared me, too. The world is changing every day. Reset, readjust, restart, refocused. Yes, improving, always improving. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And that will conclude our session tonight or today. And we will see you all next Saturday. So thank you all for continuing to support those with aphasia. And a great thank you to the Rhode Island Department of Health for sponsoring us and our support from the NAA. Have a great week, everybody.